In the bustling streets of New York City, where chaos is the norm and everyone's just minding their own business, a lady suddenly falls from the sky. Now, that's not entirely unusual for New York. What is unusual, though, is that instead of cleaning up the usual mess, the health organization quickly seals off the area. Why? Because they're dealing with something far worse, the Medusa virus. Doctors worldwide are baffled, with no clue about the cause or cure of this deadly new strain. A news anchor fills in the terrified public. In the first stage, the virus lies dormant for 30 to 60 days after infection. In the second stage, within just 12 hours, the infected start to turn to stone, literally petrified, and the kicker: the fatality rate is a rock-solid 100%. With the world in absolute chaos, economies collapsing, and political tensions rising, a smooth-talking Russian businessman named Ivan Viga steps up, announcing that his group, Venus Gate, is working on a cure. He confidently declares, "The ice will conquer the stone," suggesting that they're going to solve this problem in the coolest way possible. Meanwhile, across the ocean, officials gather to discuss the unsettling possibility that the Medusa virus might be a bioweapon cooked up by Venus Gate, especially now that the US president has fallen victim to it. They suspect Vega might be more dangerous than helpful. Convinced he's up to no good, they decide to spy on and possibly sabotage Venus Gate's operations, naming the mission with ironic flair, Sleeping Beauty. Cut to 3 buses arriving at Venus Gate's lab/castle, where volunteers have signed up to be put into hibernation. The scientists believe they can outsmart the virus by freezing the infected before the petrification kicks in. Inside, the main character, Kasumi, checks in, gets a bracelet, and is told she has to leave her bright, always optimistic twin sister, Shizuku, to attend a briefing with Vega. After listening to the charming Russian deliver his speech, one sensible person asks what would happen if the staff dies while the volunteers are frozen. With a self-assured smile, Vega explains that an AI system named Alice runs everything, monitoring the residents' physical and emotional states through their wristbands. The camera then cuts to Kasumi, sitting alone and staring at her bracelet. A scar on her wrist hints at her past struggles. She's clearly torn about going through hibernation, knowing she'll be alone for 100 years without her sister's support. Later, the twins argue outside, with Kasumi expressing her fear of being alone. Shizuku, hiding her own sadness, tells her to be brave, promising they'll reunite eventually. It's a touching sisterly moment, until the camera randomly zooms in on a frog in the grass. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. The next day, the volunteers hand over their belongings and undergo tests before entering their matrix-like pods. As Kasumi steps inside, Alice soothes her, and the freezing process begins. We're then hit with random scenes of soldiers firing weapons, followed by a flashback of the sisters' heartfelt moment. Kasumi wakes up, along with the other volunteers, to find the once pristine facility now overgrown with thorny vines. As they try to make sense of it all, a mutated bat suddenly lands on Kasumi's pod, knocking her over. She's caught by 2 guys who ask what's wrong, and she points up to a terrifying swarm of gigantic bats that swoop down in a frenzy. In a panic, the group forces open an elevator door, only to realize too late that there's no elevator, just a sheer drop. As a few unlucky ones fall, a monstrous creature rises from the pit, grabbing an old man. Kasumi and a blonde guy manage to save him. But then the blonde gets caught by the creature and meets an unfortunate end. After the dust settles, the survivors, a mismatched group, gather to figure out their next move. Naturally, tensions flare as the group's more dominant personalities clash. But the blonde quickly takes charge, establishing herself as the group's calm and collected leader. Welcome to Venus Gate. Try not to lose your head or anything else. The group decides it's time to head to the upper levels. But first, they wrap their bare feet with pieces of torn t-shirts because no one wants to be a human pincushion for those pesky thorns. As they make their way up the tower, Kasumi can't help but wonder why Marco, a jacked-up criminal with a permanent scowl, looks so familiar. Soon, they hit a dead end flooded with murky water. And that's when things go from bad to worse. A monster appears and, with a casual swipe, detaches the old man's head like it's popping a cork. Just as panic sets in, Tim, the little boy with more survival knowledge than most adults, shouts at the group to stop running. He calmly explains that the monster, known as a Demonsaurus, hunts by sound because it has terrible vision. Marco asks if Tim is sure, and before you can say bad idea, he flings both Tim and Catherine into the water as bait. With the monster distracted, the rest of the group swims across and makes it to the other side, but soon realize Kasumi's gone missing. Marco dives back in, finds Kasumi unconscious underwater, and saves her with the help of Peter. Once Kasumi is safe and sound, the group's relief is short-lived. They're surrounded by a dozen Demonsauruses. Chaos erupts, and everyone bolts while Marco tries to slow the creatures down. They reach a semi-open gate and stumble upon some guns conveniently left behind. They blast away at the ugly beasts, barely surviving the onslaught, before regrouping in a security room. Here, they patch up their wounds, reload their weapons, and attempt to figure out their situation using the computers. Then, things take a strange turn. Catherine suddenly has a meltdown and, in a bizarre twist, threatens to slap Tim, but snaps out of it, hugs him, and apologizes. Ron, the cop who never misses a chance for a snarky remark, suggests Catherine's hiding something from her past. Marco jumps in, dismissing the idea and pointing the finger at Peter instead. The group drills Peter with questions until he snaps, grabs Kasumi as a hostage, and bolts to the elevator. In the elevator, Peter makes a cryptic comment before the camera cuts back to the guys arming themselves for a rescue mission. Unbeknownst to them, a horde of Demonsauruses is lurking nearby, putting their rescue on hold. Now, they need to sneak further up the tower via a thorn-covered, broken bridge. Everything's going smoothly until Catherine's hand gets pricked by a thorn, alerting the Demonsauruses to their location. Thinking fast, Marco shoots a fuel container, triggering an explosion that temporarily saves the day. We cut to some heavy, depressing flashbacks from Kasumi's past. After spinning through a twisted dreamscape, she wakes up in a lab surrounded by samples of monsters. Here's where things get wild. Kasumi overhears Peter chatting with someone, and surprise, it's Marco. When Marco leaves the room, Peter, knowing Kasumi was eavesdropping, hands her a chip loaded with valuable info about Medusa before getting dramatically eaten by a Demonsaurus. Classic Peter, right? But just as the Demonsaurus sets its sights on Kasumi, Marco rushes back in, guns blazing, and saves the day. For now, they hightail it out of there, with the monster hot on their heels. Their escape plan? Climb through a hole in the ceiling. Except, the creature's right behind them. Cue Marco going mano a mano with the beast, while Kasumi, in a thrilling act of whoops, drops the chip. It catches fire from the Molotov cocktails Ron and Kathy toss at the monster. With the crew back together, they make their way to a storage room, where Marco decides to spill the beans. Turns out, our resident tough guy is actually a second lieutenant sent by the US to blow up the facility. The suspicion: Venus Gate was making Medusa as a bioweapon. But no time for heartfelt confessions. The floor starts shaking, and something's pounding on the door. That something, none other than Dr. Ivan Viga, CEO of Venus Gate, and the ultimate Russian Sigma male, Dr. Viga, who apparently has the best movie lines ever, drops a bombshell. A test subject went rogue, and, in his words, the genie's out of the lamp. This whole hibernation thing, a cover-up for their real goal, learning to control dreams and turn them into reality. Casual, right? As they climb through a hidden passage, Viga gives them the backstory. 8 years ago, meteorites hit a Siberian village. Everyone died from a mysterious disease except one girl. The Krypton, a bizarre creature that defied the laws of biology, sprung from her imagination. Yep, things just got weirder. Turns out, the girl, the demon monkey, and Medusa are all connected. Dr. Viga says the girl survived Medusa's effects by creating the creature. And guess what? The group's next stop is Alice, the girl's AI consciousness, living on despite her physical death. Vega tries to pull a dramatic move and end his own life with a hidden gun. But Kasumi and Marco stop him. Kasumi suspects the rogue test subject is her sister, so she demands to see her. Suddenly, thorny vines burst from the ground, sending Tim running, and the crew follows. Only to be blocked by the relentless demon they just can't seem to kill. Marco, ever the fighter, stays behind to face it. Just when his luck runs out, a sword pierces the demon's throat, saving him. But in a bittersweet twist, Peter turns to stone, sacrificing himself in the most heroic way possible. The group catches up to Tim at an abandoned well, where Marco arrives to reveal that Alice had hijacked Tim's body, guiding them there for her own purposes. She vanishes, and Tim regains control. With no other choice, they dive into the rising water, escaping outside to find the castle now covered in thorns. Meanwhile, Kasumi discovers a recording of her sister Shizuku having seizures, realizing the thorns are born from her sister's dreams. Ignoring Marco's warnings, she rushes back to confront her. As Marco, Tim, and Catherine fly toward the dragon-shaped castle in a helicopter, things take a wild turn when Catherine pulls a gun on Marco. She wants to escape and live peacefully with Tim, but Marco reminds her there's no outrunning this nightmare. The helicopter spins out of control, and Marco is thrown out, barely holding on to the castle before re-entering and crashing into the same room as Kasumi. Kasumi asks if Tim and Catherine are okay, and Marco grimly replies, "I don't think so." Teaming up to find Shizuku, they reach the final lab, where Marco has illusions of his dead sister attacking him, courtesy of Alice controlling his mind. He snaps out of it by shooting himself in the neck, shutting down Alice's system, but taking a heavy hit in the process. Meanwhile, Kasumi confronts a thorn clone of Shizuku, who urges her to leave. Kasumi refuses and fights back, hurting herself, which overwhelms Shizuku, causing the thorns outside to spiral out of control. As the castle collapses, Kasumi reaches Shizuku's body. Realizing she died long ago, Shizuku had dreamt her back to life after a tragic double suicide attempt. Shizuku pushes Kasumi to safety just as the castle crumbles. Marco catches her, and they leap into the ocean, where Shizuku's vines gently lower them to the ground. With the chaos over, Marco, fatally wounded, asks Kasumi to live happily as his final wish. He dies with a smile, and Kasumi, after kissing him on the cheek, heads off with little Tim, who, against all odds, has survived. Phew, what a wild ride, right? If your brain's still intact after all those twists, be sure to give us a like and hit that subscribe button. Who knows, your support might just stop the next Demonsaurus from chomping down on a beloved character. See you in the next mind-bending adventure.